Chapter 14 of Her Love from Above. The Setup. Eamon stood outside the old telephone booth, waiting with anticipation. His sandy brown hair, cut military style because it believed it heightened his air of intimidation at the police station, was hidden beneath an old mop of a wig purchased the evening before at a local thrift store. His face, usually fair-complected, was darkened with makeup, making him look Native American. Between the wig, the darkened skin, and ragged clothes, his own mother would not recognize him. He breathed deeply while trying to calm his nerves. He had waited for years for this day, the day Jeni would receive her rightful due for humiliating him in front of his peers, his church, and all who knew him. When the woman named Madison had called concerning his missing wife, Jeni, all the pain, anger, and humiliation of her betrayal came crashing back down. His fists clenched. Jeni belonged to him, and she knew it. Their marriage was sealed during their wedding ceremony inside the Mormon Holy Temple. She would be his goddess wife for all eternity. She would one day bear his spirit children, with whom he, being a god at that time, would populate his own planet. The Book of Mormon was very clear about this issue. She was his wife now and forever, regardless of what the country court system declared. Eamon smiled as he thought about Jeni's beauty, but his thoughts quickly turned venomous. She was brilliant. She understood the honored position he had bestowed upon her, the gift of becoming his goddess wife for all eternity. But instead of being an obedient wife and showing him the honor befitting such a priceless gift, she'd betrayed him. Her only salvation now was through blood. Her blood. Her blood had to be shed so her eternal sins could be forgiven. She would be his wife in the afterlife, whether she liked it or not. And when he was the god of his own planet, he would answer to no man. If Jeni or any of his other wives dishonored him by disobedience, his punishment would be swift and severe. Eamon's mind traveled back to the day of their marriage. Jeni was stunning, her beauty one of a kind. Her long blonde hair was exquisite, braided and pinned in a simple yet splendid manner that brought all attention to her flawless face. She was sweet, sincere, and innocent when she spoke her vows to him, reminding him of the princess in so many fairy tales, so perfect. He knew the first moment he saw her that she would produce the most beautiful spirit children in all eternity. That's why he chose her to be his wife. But how quickly things had changed. He shoved his gloved hand inside the torn pocket of his jacket and pulled out an old photo of their wedding day. He didn't want Jeni killed. He wanted her back. He longed to relish in her beauty. Yet he saw no other option. She was no longer the innocent 17-year-old he married all those years earlier. Now, she was a grown woman who for years had made her own way in the world. Since she was hard to control back then, she would be impossible to control now. Even if she pleaded with him to take her back and not end her life, she would find a way to bring him down. She was too smart for her own good, so killing her was his only option. He was sure of it. A blood atonement must be made. Eamon returned the photo to his pocket, then pulled off his gloves and blew warm air on his fingers. Alma should have contacted him by now, and he couldn't understand what was taking his nephew so long. He kept his head down while slowly examining the area. So far, dressed like a bum. No one had given him the time of day. People were far too concerned with their own problems, which included staying warm with a crazy cold front bearing down upon them, to be concerned with one lone man standing by an old phone booth. The last rays of sunlight swept across the horizon as a single figure strolled down the cracked and unkempt sidewalk. Despite it being a dangerous neighborhood, his walk was steady and sure. His garment, comprised of various grays, whites, and dark purples, along with his dark hair, fair-complected skin, and enormous size, made him frightening to behold in both the physical and spiritual realms. Having departed the Almighty's presence only minutes earlier, he still carried God's glowing essence. He slowed his approach and shifted to an invisible state in the spiritual realm because his presence needed to be kept unknown to any demonic stragglers loitering in the area. His current assignment had been years in the making, and there could be no mistakes. He paused and scanned the neighborhood, then turned and walked through the brick wall of a nearby building. When he appeared on the other side of that wall, he stood in a small, well-lit department store. He smiled at the skinny, red-haired teen with blemishes coloring his face, who smiled back at him in the nearby mirror. This was Lieutenant Chazaqua's favorite disguise, for it gave him the vibe of being weak and vulnerable, thus ensuring that any decent person would defend him against bullies. He continued walking unseen through the walls of the following 4 department stores until he was standing only 20 feet from Almond and the old telephone booth. As he walked toward the exit, he unveiled his presence in the physical realm. "It's about time," Almond charged when he picked up the old phone receiver. Many years of grime made the receiver sticky to his glove, but he ignored this irritation because of the call's importance and his anxiousness to leave this part of his scheme behind. Still, he held the receiver away from his face as he spoke. "What have you been doing?" he demanded as he glanced through the scratched glass of the phone booth at the individual standing and sitting around the run-down neighborhood. It was beyond him how anyone could live in such filth. "I've been waiting here for an hour," he barked. "It took me some time to check out that place," Alma answered. "It's in the middle of nowhere, and getting in and out without being seen is not easy. I had to hike miles." Almond took another deep breath while trying to calm his nerves. He needed to relax. It wasn't his nephew's fault things had worked out this way. It was Jeni's. He needed to handle the issues at hand, leave this filthy neighborhood behind, and deal with his emotions later. "What's it look like?" he quizzed. "It's got one main building, a Western lodge." "Do you know for certain it's Haven's Rest?" "Yes," Alma answered. "Haven's Rest Lodge is carved into the door in large letters." "Is Jeni there?" "Yes. I saw someone who matched her description perfectly. It was a bit dark at the time, but I knew her. She hasn't changed a bit. Her hair is still long like it used to be, and she was walking with a young man they called Johnny, just like your informant said." "Okay." Almond took in another deep breath. Madison told the truth. Jeni was hiding at a place called Haven's Rest, and now his many years of searching would end. "Give me the details." "Jeni and Johnny will both be easy to eliminate. I followed them to her cabin. She's staying there alone. At least it looks like she's alone. There's no sign of a man living there. It should be easy to get to her. The tricky part will be waiting until they're together. If I kill one before the other, the place will be swarming with law enforcement, and we don't need that because it'll take me a while to hike back out. If you can only get one of them, I want it to be Jeni. We can get her lover at any other time," he instructed as his anger seethed just below the surface. Many years had passed, and he had guessed that she would have moved on, but he was quickly realizing that guessing and knowing were 2 very different animals. "Yes, sir," Alma replied. "She's priority." "And what about the Madison girl?" Almond asked. "We'll have to get her after she leaves Haven's Rest. She's staying in the main lodge, and unless we want a bloodbath that includes several other people, We'll have to follow her to wherever she lives and do it there." "Her husband is insured," Almond informed. "I checked. She'll keep her mouth shut for a while so she can collect the money. She's not important right now, so she'll wait." "When are we doing this?" Alma asked. "Tonight." Almond's voice cracked, but Alma ignored it. He understood the many years of anguish Jeni had caused his uncle, years he could never get back. "Okay," Alma agreed. "Joffrey will be here in a few minutes. It'll take us an hour or so to get back out there, an additional hour to hike to the lodge, and then we'll have to wait for the right opportunity. Regardless, it'll be done tonight." "Alma," Almond began solemnly, "don't lament over this. Jeni brought this on herself. She is my property. She tried to destroy my life. She disgraced me to my friends and the church. When the time comes, don't hesitate to kill her." "I won't." "She's beautiful," Almond cautioned. "Don't let her beauty get in the way." "I won't, Uncle. I remember what she did to you, to us all." Almond hung up the receiver and leaned against the telephone booth. It was over. The next time he spoke with Alma, Jeni would be dead, and he would be in the clear. If any questions arose, his appearance at the police dinner that evening would be his alibi. The only electronic evidence of him talking to anyone from the town near Haven's Rest was the call Madison made to his cell phone when he was at work, and she had placed that call from a phone booth. Unlike his Jeni. She didn't sound very intelligent, but at least she was smart enough not to use her personal phone. When Madison was dead, he would be entirely in the clear. As far as anyone around him would know, he was still grieving the loss of his lovely wife, the wife someone had kidnapped so many years earlier. "Hey, mister," a voice called from behind. Almond turned to see a red-haired teen with severe blemishes approaching. "Do you got a light?" The young man held up his lighter and flicked it to show that it didn't work. "No," Almond answered, "I don't." "Man, come on, I just need—" "No," Almond stated more forcefully while ducking his head and turning to leave. It was finished. The last thing he needed was for someone to get a good look at him now. He wished he could become invisible. "Mister, that ain't—" "I don't smoke," Almond barked, "and neither should you. Go away." When the team abruptly stepped in his path, Almond pushed him backward. No one, especially some wayward teen, got in his way. "Hey, man, you can't push—" The obnoxious kid jumped up and moved back in his path. Almond was boiling mad, and without considering the consequences, he punched the teen in the face. "I told you to leave me alone," he stormed. When he turned to leave, every eye on the street was centered on him, and several men were walking in his direction. "Great," he muttered. He turned back to the bloody teen, reached down, and helped him up. "I'm sorry, son," he said. "I'm in a bit of a—" "You ain't got no right to hit a boy like that," someone yelled. Almond raised his hands and started backing away. "I'm sorry, This ain't your neighborhood, and you come here and thinks you can push us around?" "No," Almond said, "that's not—" "Boys," an older man hollered, "teaching time." Almond ran, but didn't get far before he was surrounded by a gang of men. A brick crashed into the back of his head, momentarily stunning him, and his vision blurred as he felt his body being knocked from one person to another. The small gathering grew, quickly becoming a mob, and he was their victim. A ring on someone's finger caught the wig and plucked it from his head. Just as he was knocked to the ground, the wail of a siren sounded in the distance. At any other time, he would have considered that siren a stroke of luck, but not today. Any officers patrolling the area would recognize him, and he would have no excuse for his appearance or why he was loitering in such a dangerous neighborhood. "It's a wig," a surprised voice called out. "I knowed he was up to no good." Someone wearing a pointed boot kicked several times in his ribs, and he felt at least one bone break. "He's a cop," a harsh voice rasped. At some point during the fight, someone had taken his wallet and now threw it back at his face. "He's a cop!" Another foot kicked his back as the siren grew louder. Almond was stunned. How could one kid cause such a nightmare in mere seconds? He grabbed his wallet and scrambled to his feet as his assailants fled. His entire body screamed in anguish as he struggled to breathe. Blood seeped into his eyes from a gash just above his hairline. His ribs hurt, and he didn't know if his arm was broken or out of joint, but it burned like fire. He stumbled forward, unable to stand straight. With the siren nearing, there was no time to waste. In a confused and dazed frame of mind, he staggered down the sidewalk like a drunk. This was insane. Even if some good Samaritan had called law enforcement, how did they arrive so quickly? When he saw the police unit turn the corner 2 blocks ahead, he knew his time was up. If they saw him, they'd know he had been among the fighting crowd, and it wouldn't matter that he had been the victim. All that would matter is that he was in this vicinity when the call from nearby Haven's Rest was received, and that would be evidence enough for his superiors to connect him to Jeni's murder. If they interviewed his current wife, she would talk. He was sure of it. And since her bruises were still visible, she would have all the proof necessary to validate her story. He grimaced at the thought. Perhaps it was time for her to vanish, too. Almond winced as he struggled toward the nearest department store, his mind racing. Why did he have such trouble finding a woman who would fulfill the role of a good wife? First Jeni, then Cara, and now Trista, all straying from their God-given role within months of marriage? He had pondered that issue much in the past few years, and his only conclusion centered on their ages. When he married them, they ranged from 17 to 21, so perhaps that was the problem. They were too old, too set in their ways when he took them as wives. That's why he recently took a bride far younger than society deemed appropriate. He shook his head in disgust because he didn't care what society thought. Joseph Smith, the founder of his faith, took a child bride, so why couldn't he? Clarissa was 12, only 2 years younger than the prophet's child bride. Perhaps that was the key to a successful marriage. His heart lifted slightly at the thought of Clarissa, such a trusting, innocent, and naive girl. He hoped that taking her at such a tender age would enable him to train her as he desired. He thought again about Trista, his current wife. He needed a daughter from her, but if he kept her much longer, she might taint Clarissa's innocence. After all, her rebellion was becoming unbearable. Lieutenant Chazakwe, now back in his angelic form, appeared inside the store as the injured man pushed open the door. Before Almond's foot could touch the shop's wooden floor, the lieutenant had already fixed the security camera's faulty wiring and directed its lens to capture the face of anyone approaching the exit. That'll do it, the lieutenant thought to himself. Almond glanced around the shop but saw no one as he limped toward the back, where an exit sign in bright red letters lit up the wall. He made his way through the aisle, keeping his face pointed downward. The last thing he'd needed was a hidden security camera capturing his facial features. "May I help you?" a female voice called. The woman was hurrying in his direction. He tilted his head away from her without realizing that he had turned directly into the security camera's line of sight. "No, ma'am. I just need to use your exit." "Sir," the woman said, "are you okay?" Almond ignored her question, pushed open the back door, and hurried into the alley. He could deal with any other hiccups in his scheme later, her included, if necessary. Right now, he needed to make it to his vehicle without being videoed and get the heck out of Dodge. People in this part of town didn't speak with law enforcement, so unless he was physically captured, there would be no tangible evidence to prove he was the one who received the call. He wasn't sure how to explain the bruises to his friends and superiors at the police dinner, but he would think of something. He had a good imagination. Almond started brainstorming as he limped toward his vehicle. When he got home, he could call in sick, or if the bruises weren't too bad, he could cover them up with makeup, make a brief appearance outside the restaurant where it was dark, then claim he was sick and leave. If he waited until someone from his department saw him in the distance, he could even call a warning not to approach because he might be contagious. Yes, he thought, that was the way to do it. He would appear in person and give an excuse concerning his need to stay home, and if necessary, he could visit a hospital in a nearby town and pay cash so there would be no record of his visit. Almond hurried the final block, unlocked his car, and clambered inside. He had made it. He was safe. He exhaled a relieving sigh, then banged the fist of his good arm against the steering wheel. This harsh movement caused his other arm to throb even worse, but he ignored the pain. He was too angry to care. Everything was perfect until that red-haired teen appeared, and now he had no assurance that he couldn't be placed outside the phone booth. "Jeni!" he screamed in a livid voice while wishing he could kill her himself. She had caused him more trouble and humiliation than any woman should ever be allowed to cause. Momentarily, he wondered if he should call the entire thing off, wait a few months, and then send Alma back. By then, no one would remember the bum beaten on the street corner. He placed his head on the steering wheel as another police vehicle sped past. "No," a voice sounded in his head. Lieutenant Chazakwa was forceful when he emphasized, "Now is the time. You don't want her vanishing again." "No," Almond decided. "No," he repeated out loud. "I gave you the honor of being my main wife for all eternity, and you spat in my face. You could have been a goddess, my most valued wife forever." He switched on the ignition and pulled from the parking spot. "No, Jeni," he repeated. "You made your decision. You die tonight, and it's a death you've earned 100-fold. You're just lucky I'm keeping you in the hereafter. Then I will deal with your treachery." Lieutenant Chazakwa watched as the vehicle eased down the street. They needed Almond to proceed with his plan tonight before Charlie and Claire left Haven's Rest, so there would be extra security available if anything went wrong.